The newsroom. At the outset of the Arab Spring, Israel's bitter rivalry with Iran sort of slipped out of the headlines. Now it's back on the front pages with a leaked report by the UN's nuclear watchdog that suggests Tehran is indeed seeking nuclear weapons, including work, for instance, on atom bomb triggers, computer-simulated detonators. Alarm bells ringing all around, with the West contemplating a fifth round of UN sanctions rejected so far by Russia, which instead calls for dialogue. In this program, we're going to size up the likelihood of a nuclear Iran, the consequences of that, and the chances of Israel actually carrying out preemptive airstrikes. Today in the France 24 debate, we look at the nuclear option with, from Tel Aviv, the Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, Dani Danon, hails from the ruling Likud party. Welcome back to the France 24 debate. From the European...
Thank you, François. It's my pleasure being on your show.
From the European Union Institute for Security Studies, François Picard. How are you, sir?
Thank you.
And the American University of Paris's very own Stephen Ekovich. The France 24 debate, which you can follow on Facebook. We'll look at some of your comments a little bit later. And on Twitter, where our handle here is @FrancoisF24. Now, it's true that most people's eyes start to glaze over when we say the words International Atomic Energy Agency, and with good reason. The UN's nuclear watchdog is a technical outfit. The report leaked Tuesday, though, certainly livelier than the usual fare out of Vienna.
Building a nuclear weapon is a complex task with a number of different stages. The IAEA's latest report says Iran has researched many of these elements, including how to obtain a source of highly enriched uranium and how to fit a nuclear warhead into existing missiles. The report says that up until 2003, such research was part of a structured nuclear weapons program. Development since then has been more piecemeal, but the agency says that some activities may still be ongoing. The watchdog claims Iran worked on detailed computer modelling of nuclear weapons as recently as 2009. While the work hasn't all been so theoretical, Iran has allegedly worked on detonator systems and on devices needed to trigger a nuclear reaction. It's also claimed that a large explosives containment vessel was built at a military complex southeast of Tehran. Such a device could have few civilian applications. According to the report, Iran has also received information from outside sources, some of whom are thought to have been based in Pakistan. Iran insists that its research is intended only for the production of civilian nuclear power.
François Picard, that's clearly not all for civilian nuclear power.
Well, not all of it. Obviously, some of it is for dual use. But as your reporter stated, it's also a question of when all of this took place. And more importantly also, of course, who knows this and who gave it to the IAEA. So the report in itself doesn't really contain that much new. The difference is that the IAEA is now giving its vouchsafing for the accuracy and the veracity of what it has already known or been given as information from early on, from different countries, particularly in the Western world.
Dani Danon, when do you think, to answer that question of when, the way things are going, when do you see Iran having a nuclear weapon?
Well, we see, and we don't need to wait for the report, we see that they're moving ahead very fast, and it's a matter of a year or more than that, that will be the point of no return. So I cannot tell you the exact date that we estimate, but we understand that we should listen very carefully to Ahmadinejad when he said that he wants to achieve nuclear capability, and we know that he wants to achieve military capability. We are very worried here in Tel Aviv, but I think also people in France and in the US should be worried as well, because if there will be Iran become nuclear, it will be a threat not only for us in Israel, but for all the Western societies.
Iran's president, by the way, reacting and not one to live down the moment, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, with something of a rhetorical answer this Wednesday.
The IAEA is just publishing reports provided by American officials. I'm sorry that the head of the IAEA, Yukiya Amano, is violating the agency's regulations and is a puppet of America. Why doesn't Mr. Amano publish reports on the arsenals of America and its allies?
Stephen Ekovich, does the Iranian president have a point? Is this uncharted territory for the, as some have claimed, for the UN nuclear watchdog?
Well, I mean, this has pretty much been an open secret as to the militarized program of Iran. So we're not learning anything really new today. I mean, we've always been skeptical of whatever information or whatever denials have been coming out of Tehran. But this gives an official imprimatur. And it does put us in a different situation. And we're not going to believe Ahmadinejad. We haven't believed him very much in the past, but it becomes even more implausible now that we have the leaked report. It'd be interesting to see what is actually in that report.
Rouzbeh Parsi, there has been criticism that basically it was intelligence agencies that really wrote the report.
Well, obviously it's not that simple, but the difference between having had this information and not being able to corroborate it or not wanting to go out with it, as they did during al-Baradei and now under Amano, of course, is an important difference. Again, I think it's important, as your own reporter said, that most of the things that we now think is so important in this report actually deals with developments from before end of 2003. As far as whatever Iran is up to after end of 2003, the report is much more vague. You'll find more may and could be, etc., in the report regarding whatever it is that they're up to at the moment.
So, Danny Danon, getting back to what you said a moment ago, what leads you to believe that there'll be a point of no return in a year?
Well, we're following very carefully what's happening today in Iran, and we're looking at the picture and the intelligence, and we understand that it's only a matter of time until there will be a bomb in Iran. And also we listen very carefully to Ahmadinejad. He is not saying differently what he's saying to his people and what he's saying in the UN. He wants to achieve a bomb in order to become the leader of the Muslim world, and I think it is very, very problematic for us. And we have to be ready. When I say we, it's not us in Israel. We ask the international community to wake up. I think it's been too long that we have too many speeches, declarations coming from President Obama, from Sarkozy, from
but concretely, you say
other leaders.
Concretely, you say there are clues that he'll have the bomb within a year. We just heard Rouzbeh Parsi say that most of the information in the report that's concrete dates back to before 2003. Again, what makes you say that within 1 year's time Iran will have the bomb?
Well, I will not be exact with the details, but when you look at what's happening now, you know it will come. It will not be in 10 years. It will not be a threat for my children. It will be a threat for us. So whether it will be 12 months or 18 months, we don't, and we cannot get into details. But it's coming pretty soon to our backyard, and we have to deal with that. We cannot say it will happen in the next generation. And I think what we see today, that we don't really put any crippling sanctions. We don't actually make Ahmadinejad to think twice whether he's going to the right direction, because he's continuing to build the bomb, and we are talking. And in the Middle East, when you don't take action, the other side sees it as a weakness. And today, the Western community is weak compared to Ahmadinejad.
So you're saying that sanctions aren't working and that there should be preemptive airstrikes?
Well, first, I think we should put real sanctions, crippling sanctions. And I give you two examples. All the issue of banking, transferring funds from Iran to Europe, to the US, to Russia. Today, it is very easy to do so. So first, we should put crippling sanctions on the banking, and also the refinery issue. If there will be no refinery, will be done on oil that is being produced in Iran, it will hurt the economy. But today, the average Iranian does not feel the sanctions. For them, it's a diplomacy game. So I think if there will be real crippling sanctions, maybe there will be a change. But if it will not happen pretty soon, then we will have to consider all options that are on the table. But one thing we cannot do, we cannot ignore what's happening now in Iran. That's not an option, not for Israel, and I think it should not be an option also for NATO and the international community.
First of all, Israeli officials have been predicting an Iranian bomb since the early 1990s. So I personally take that with a great pinch of salt. Then when it comes to the decision-making process in Iran, we have to remember it's not actually Ahmadinejad's purview to decide whether there is going to be a bomb or not. That has always been on the desk of the supreme leader. I mean, when Khatami was president and he was being much more open towards the IAEA, and that's when Iran was on the verge of signing and also ratifying the additional protocol, which would allow for more intrusive inspections, then the critics were saying that the Iranian president doesn't really have anything to say about the Iranian energy program. And now we're saying that because the president says X, Y, and Z, it means an imminent danger.
And on the point that sanctions aren't hurting?
Sanctions are hurting, but they're hurting ordinary people. And of course, the big if in what your guest from Israel is saying is that if we hurt ordinary people enough, they will somehow convey that to their leaders and that will change their mind. I doubt that very much.
It's always a problem with sanctions. It's very difficult to have very targeted, precise sanctions against decision makers. That's attempted, and sometimes there's something of a success with that. But in most cases, it does hurt the population, which has the contrary effect of alienating those who are placing sanctions and even strengthening the regime that is targeted. It's not even clear that the Iranians would go all the way to actually making a bomb. That might not be a good idea. It even plays in their favor in some way, this report, because it does demonstrate that they're at some level, very probably, on the point of militarizing. That's enough for deterrence. That's enough to establish a forceful diplomatic presence in the region. So it's not sure that we're going to see Iranians build a bomb and explode a bomb. That might even be counterproductive in terms of their presence in the region and their desire for a certain hegemonic presence or an important presence in the region. After all, a bomb that's detonated that clearly demonstrates that Iran has the capability could lead to nuclear proliferation in the region and ironically, create more insecurity for Iran. So in a larger context, of course it's dangerous that the Iranians would have a nuclear bomb. It's dangerous because it would embolden them to make diplomatic démarches or even military threats in the region and elsewhere, because you can't, very effectively strike out against somebody who has the capability of quickly building a bomb and perhaps even using it. That's why the Israelis talk like this also. It's an attempt to build deterrence. We're always going to get Israeli discourse like this because the idea here is that, we're always considering, we're not taking the military strike off the table, even though it seems improbable to us. It still creates enough uncertainty to build an Israeli posture of deterrence.
And over the weekend, Israel's President Shimon Peres warning that the time for airstrikes was growing nearer. Similar sounds this Wednesday from the leader of Israel's opposition.
After the report, the facts are clear. Iran tries to achieve a nuclear weapon. It's not an Israeli problem, it's the problem of the entire world. And the free world must unite in order to stop nuclear Iran, and time for action is now.
However, there seems to be a disconnect between what the politicians are saying across the political aisles in Israel and what the military establishment is saying. The former intelligence chief, Meir Dagan, revealing last spring that he and other security officials had forestalled a Netanyahu-Barak plan to hit Iran about a year ago. Dagan, who back in May said an attack on Iran was, quote, the stupidest thing I have ever heard. How do you explain, Danny Danon, this disconnect between what politicians are saying and what the military establishment in Israel is saying?
First of all, we have a very strong democracy in Israel, and the political leadership take decisions. With all due respect to the military professionals, they're not the one to take decisions. Prime Minister Menachem Begin, when he decided to attack the nuclear reactor in Iraq in 1981, it wasn't the military recommendation whether to do it or not. It took the decision back then. And also today, if we will get to the point when we will have to reach a decision, it will not be the decision of the military or the Mossad or any other military organization. It will be the decision of the leadership, elected leadership in Israel. And I think today you see a bipartisan support for the Prime Minister to ensure the safety and the well-being of the Israelis. We cannot ignore hearing the speeches coming from Iran, seeing the hatred, and telling to its people, we will have the force to eliminate the Zionists and the Americans, and tomorrow it will be the Europeans as well. We cannot just sit down and wait to see what he will do. We cannot play that game.
All right, we're pleased to be joined at this point by the Financial Times Middle East correspondent in Cairo, Borzu Daragahi. Borzu, welcome back to the France 24 debate. What's your take, Borzu, on the rhetoric, the level of discourse that you were hearing out of Israel?
Well, I mean, I don't think that it's anything unusual. It's nothing that we haven't heard before. Maybe it's a little bit of a ratcheting up. There seems to be some sort of coordinated diplomatic effort on the part of the West and Israel, timed with the IAEA report, to increase the pressure on Iran. It remains to be seen whether Iran will respond. In the past, it has responded to pressure with pressure, to rhetoric with rhetoric, to war games with its own war games. And I imagine that this will be the pattern this time as well.
Now, the French, too, have been outspoken against Iran this Wednesday, and we'll hear more from the foreign minister later. But it seems as though when you scratch below the surface, it's not always the case. Satirical weekly Le Canard Enchaîné quotes a French intelligence expert as saying, "This is all public relations, nothing more. Netanyahu's flexing his muscles, but bombing's out of the question without logistical support from the Americans." Danny Danon, your reaction?
Well, we have the military capability of dealing with any risk in the Middle East. But I don't think it should be the task of the Israeli Air Force to deal with that threat. It should be the task and the duty of the Americans, the European. We are all in the same danger. So if push comes to shove and we get to a point where nobody else will be willing to deal with the threat, we do have the military capability, but I don't think it should be our task to deal with this problem. I read a poll in the US that most of the Americans support Israel that will deal with the threat from Iran. That's very nice. I'm sure most Europeans as well. And I'm sure most Israelis will be very happy if somebody else will deal with that threat. I think we are in the same boat, and we have together to deal with the threat and not throw it to somebody else and say, not in my backyard. Somebody else should deal with that. We are in the same boat. We have to work together to overcome this threat.
Your reaction to that, Stephen Ekovich?
Well, it is true that American public opinion is always supportive of the existence and the security of Israel. So that's nothing unusual or new. Even if there were no logistical, just suppose, even if there were no logistical support from the Americans would still be blamed because there is a widely held belief, and we've just heard it from the French Foreign Ministry, that logistical support of the Americans must be necessary. I don't know. I can't say today if the Israelis really have the capability on their own to do it. Perhaps they do. But in any case, they would have to fly over airspace that is largely controlled by the United States. So if they made it through, the obvious conclusion to be drawn by everybody is that the Americans let them through. And maybe they hadn't let them through, but anyhow, it would be an obvious conclusion. So whether the Americans give the green light or no, whether there's logistical support by the Americans or not, in any case, the Americans are going to be blamed as sort of co-conspirators on this.
And when we come back, we'll look at the U.S. position as well as the position of the Iranians. Stay with us. The France 24 debate continues.